Okay, Megan, I'll give it a second and then you're good to go.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second meeting for the Removal and Disposal Subcommittee. In case I have anybody that's new this time, my name is Meghan Kies. I work for Department of Environmental Quality, the Tidewater Regional Office in Virginia Beach. I'm a Pollution Response Program Coordinator. My background includes, I was a Federal On-Scene Coordinator Representative for the Coast Guard, as well as an Environmental Compliance Manager for an OSRO in Portsmouth, Virginia. Let me share my screen and pull up the agenda. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, should I make it any bigger? Is that okay?
I think we're okay. Yep.
Okay, so a recap of our last meeting. We basically just got to know each other, where we all work and what we can bring to the table for this subcommittee. And I also spoke on my expectations for the group, which is basically to become the subject matter experts for removal and disposal. And by doing that, I suggested that we look at other states' processes that have done this successfully in the past. We got to hear from Dorothy Deal from the Oregon State Marine Board in the last full work group meeting. And I thought she had a lot of helpful things. She said a lot of things that got my wheels turning for this subcommittee. We also need to be familiar with contractors and landfills that can fulfill removal of abandoned derelict vessels. And I also mentioned that we'd likely be leaning on the laws and policies subcommittee and the funding subcommittee. So if anybody has participated in any of those meetings, you'll see that our group gets brought up a lot, and some things that we would be interested in get brought up a lot. Both of those subcommittees have had 2 meetings so far. The latest one for laws and policies was last Friday, and then the latest for funding was on Monday. The other subcommittee I haven't spoken on yet is the Prevention and Public Outreach Subcommittee. They had their first meeting first week in March, I believe. Let's see. All right, so moving right along, I guess. I've invited Anthony Cusato from William and Mary to speak with us. Last time in our last meeting, there was some concern brought up over what is a liability if an organization, as we keep saying, puts a line on a derelict vessel. And usually this means the vessel is an immediate hazard to navigation. What are the liabilities if an organization that could be the Marine Division of like police or fire, or, you know, towboat happens to be by or be near, what are their liabilities when they put a line on that vessel? And I heard Anthony speak on this last Friday at the Laws and Policies Subcommittee, and I was hoping he could, that question was asked to him, and I was hoping he could just repeat his answer and maybe foster a discussion if there's any further questions for him. And also, I forgot to say this, Anthony Cusato is working on the white paper policy. He's on that team at William and Mary. So Anthony, if you'd like to, if you need me to repeat it, I can, but take it away.
Yeah, I think I got it. So unfortunately, you know, my answer was pretty vague in the other meeting because the issue is pretty vague, at least in Virginia, and I think it's something that should be addressed. As far as like putting a line on a vessel, it's pretty unclear in Virginia what exactly the liability would be. I think a state agency would be in a much more comfortable state if there was like an immediate hazard to navigation. I don't think they would have a lot of issues if they needed to move a vessel, because, you know, VMRC is authorized to move the vessels. The liability is not clearly defined, but it'd probably go into like your regular liability of state officials, which is usually somewhat shielded. That is something that Virginia should probably clarify, though, in a new approach. Just for example, like Florida explicitly lays out that their FWC officers and any law enforcement officer like acting under the removal statutes they have are not liable for like any damage to the vessel they're moving. And they also specify like a removal and relocation, which is, I assume, is what we're talking about with like putting a line on it discussion, is just getting it out of the way. So they actually do actively address that issue, which Virginia, as far as I can tell, does not. I've been looking, haven't really been able to find any specifics, unfortunately. So sorry for not giving you the most clear answer. But I think in general, and then you also mentioned a towboat. I think a towboat acting on their own, I think would be a tricky situation. I don't have the answer to that, but I would be more, I think that would be more of a liability concern for a towboat to just act on their own accord. If they're hired by the state, I think that goes into a separate issue, but if they're just decide to move a boat, they are probably in Virginia exposing themselves to some liability, even if they're acting just in goodwill.
Okay, so on Friday, you talked about a liability shield, and you may have just been referencing other states. Is that liability shield, is that if the agency is hired by the state? Is that the shield you were talking about?
So in Florida, it's specifically for state officers or anyone acting under that statute, which I believe would also include people hired to remove, because they almost always contract out. Unless it's like an emergency and they need to move it themselves, but usually they would contract out. So I believe that would also apply to them. And that is a Florida example. In Virginia, I haven't seen any rules like that. So it's very, very unclear what the liability would be in Virginia.
Okay, so I don't know, maybe this is a question for offline, and maybe Jeff can jump in. Is it possible, we talked about last meeting, our group making a recommendation for that to maybe go in the white paper policy. Is it too late to recommend something be put into policy about liability when there's a vessel adrift that's immediate hazard to navigation, making it more clear about what the liability for an agency is that's acting out of goodwill? I don't know.
So,
I think the more specific the question would be great. Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, can I clarify that? By agency, do you mean like a state agency, or do you mean just
So
somebody, like anybody?
most likely a police or the Marine division of like a police or fire, which I'm thinking about my area, Tidewater region. We have those all over the place, ready to go all the time. Now in like Lake Anna or Smith Mountain Lake, I'm not even familiar with it, Smith Mountain Lake, it might be Sea Tow or Towboat US, and they're professionals at towing. I think they should be covered by a liability shield as well.
Can I say
Not
something?
just Joe Boater. I mean, like that's one of the agencies I'm listing. Go ahead.
So I'm Terry Hill. I'm Towboat US Potomac, and I've been chairman of our national association called Seaport, which represents all the towing and salvage companies in the country. Got a lot of history on this, worked with NASBLA very early on some of the early papers and early investigations on how to handle derelict vessels and abandoned vessels. So I've got pretty deep knowledge. It's been doing this for over 30 years. You put a line on a boat, you own it. You are in control of it, whether it's a state agency or whether it's an individual company. And it's the problem with an individual company is we're subject to every lawsuit and every whim there is. So that's the problem. If you have a contract with me and I'm doing it under your contract, and within that, the liabilities are clearly spoken out, no problem. We can do that all day long. Otherwise, it's the vessel owner that has to technically contract me to deal with that, or would come back and say, what did you do with my boat? I can't just hook up to it, take it away and make it go away, kind of poof, it's gone. Because they will come back and say there was value in that boat and you're going to have to pay me for it. So we have to have that hashed out and completely formalized in order to get there. It doesn't matter, again, whether it's state agency is probably most likely exempt from the liabilities of taking control of the boat and holding it. If it gets damaged while they have it, let's just assume that this is a boat of value, but it is adrift. Well, then if there's any damage to the vessel, that agency is most likely at this point liable for it to whatever degree that is. But otherwise, the owner of the boat had a responsibility to get it out of there, the navigation too. So it gets back and forth. They're going to come after me very quickly. They're not going to come after you or the state agency so quickly. So that's kind of how I see it.
Okay.
Mr. Is it Hill is your last name?
Hill, Hill, Terry, Terry.
So I had a question for you. Do you know of other states that have effectively managed this issue?
Maryland does a good job with it. They have won the funding to dispose of the boats. They've also I've had great success with them because they have their agency, the NRP are very aggressive. I'm going to say more so aggressive than the VMRC is in our state. I had one boat that that washed up on the shore over here. Somebody cast it out of DC and it turned out to be just a total derelict. And they tracked down the original owner of that boat, which was 3 owners prior, living in New England, and forced her to take possession and deal with the boat. We made an arrangement, took care of it, but they were very aggressive with it. VMRC, I've found, is not as aggressive with that kind of thing. Like you said, you've talked to the others, Florida. Everybody now, once a hurricane hits a state, they start to develop a better program. So you had Florida was active moving towards that direction, but when Maria hit, they actually took major steps forward with NSF. I think it's 10, the ESF 10 rather. And then that had to be massaged. And there's a whole myriad of things to talk about there too. But North Carolina has just jumped on and done a pretty good job. And we heard, I think, from South Carolina, Georgia, I guess it was. So the coastal states are starting to become more adapt to it because they're having large volumes of these. So at this point, I would point to Maryland as my first to look at, closest to us.
And that includes their dealing with liability issues.
I would say so. They've been doing this for quite some time, and for the most part, it's still a tricky quagmire, quicksand basic situation that nobody wants to touch it. You're going to find your county agencies around here. There's Northern Virginia is my area, but it's going to be anywhere. But the local agencies are going to be less likely to take it. They don't even want to take a DUI into custody because of the liability, and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know what to do. They have a great record program on the road, but they don't know what to do on the water. And it is a much more dynamic area too. So I would say that the whole country lacks in that. I don't know that anybody has anything that's been well proven, but yeah, I'm sure somebody has.
Great. That's great input. I wanted to point out too that we do have a contact information for the man who runs the Maryland program. And we've talked about having him come in and speak to either one of the subcommittees or the whole committee about their program. But thank you. That was my last question. Back to you, Meghan.
Okay. All right. So I think that's going to be it for the liability discussion today. I'm going to move on to the next item. Anthony, you're welcome to stay with us. I don't know how busy you are. Thank you so much for joining us.
So I did have one kind of follow-up thought on Maryland. I think I might have forgotten to mention it in the law and policy subgroup meeting. Something interesting that's in Maryland's code for their removal is that their natural resource police can actually seize a vessel they determine to be derelict immediately. They do not have to wait to notify the owner of the vessel. They can, if they determine to be derelict or hazard navigation, they can seize it immediately, and then they have to go through the process of notifying the owner. But they can get it out of the way quickly, and I think that's something that's an interesting approach, and something that I think I would probably recommend Virginia kind of incorporate as well, just for those liability issues. Kind of push them off to the side, say VMRC, you are authorized to move this boat if it is in the way.
And can we make that authorization for, I keep bringing this up because like I said, I'm Tidewater. So my agencies that deal with are fire and police. Could we make that for fire and police as well?
Yeah, so in that way, we being Virginia legislature, which is a whole separate issue. This is, what I recommend, what the Virginia legislature will do are, probably slightly different. But so you would have to write that out as, say, VMRC or DOR, or whoever this is authorizing, plus others authorized to act under the statute, which you would then specify to be, locality, law enforcement. You probably have to specify, you said fire departments. I don't know if they would count under that. And then, if we would want private towboats to be able to do that as well, that would be something else that have to be specified in the statute to be pretty clear.
So This is something that Gary and Terry would probably know. I'm not familiar with Lake Anna, Smith Mountain Lake, any of these. I'm familiar with Tidewater, Elizabeth River, James River. Is DWR like constantly on the water, like pretty much ready to go? I feel like those lakes, I feel like it's towboat or sea tow. I don't know who's ready to go. So maybe I'm just wondering if I need to let it go with the private towboat companies getting liability, because if DWR is there, that's good enough.
So I'm gonna jump in on that as well. DWR, we're kind of Virginia's also in a tricky spot. DWR does not really have an authorization to remove statute on the books. It's for VMRC. So DWR kind of like it's a strange split. DWR is kind of doing the vessel registrations and kind of like the overall thing, but the actual like authorization statutes in Virginia to remove a derelict vessel are for VMRC. So that's something I'm recommending that should be clarified. And so, yeah, sorry, I think that's kind of going to preface the answer to that question a little bit.
I would suggest that I would definitely not put the authority on a private company. It would, and I would hesitate to put it on a fire department. I would suggest that it is a law enforcement agency, whether it's state, local, they would have that authority. Like I said, VMRC has the rules if a vessel is left abandoned on the river bottom or on navigable waters and state bottom, then they can authorize and do whatever they need to do. It's a very slow process for them, so maybe we can speed that up. But I would suggest that we try to craft it so that it gives the authority to law enforcement agencies, local and state. I just wouldn't stick it on a private company, because that starts to be, that's tough.
Okay. No, I'm glad we hammered that out. And I just kept bringing up the private towboat companies because I'm like, oh, Lake Anna, all they have is towboat. No, they have law enforcement agencies there. Got it.
Also, it makes me think that we really need to talk to Lake Gaskin as well, another large freshwater lake. And I'll add that to my list of contacts that we need to make.
Megan, this is Gary. Can I say something?
Yes.
Down on Lake Anna, we don't have the luxury of VMRC. We have Department of Game and Inland Fisheries and Fire and Rescue and Law Enforcement from Louisiana and Spotsylvania already refer to us everything. They will not hook rope to a boat for any reason for the liability, because they have no clue how to handle the liability. And we have the same as Captain Hill was speaking about on the road policy for a contract for towing and removal of things of that nature. We have a written agreement with them where we come out, they will parallel us in tow to a port, and they will transfer the boat to a road tower. But they are paralleling us to the port. They will not hook rope and line to anything out on Lake Anna because of the liability.
So maybe by having that liability policy for law enforcement agencies, that could fix that problem.
I don't, Captain Hill, are you still on here, sir?
Yeah, I'm here.
What would that be? Because I mean, we're in a very small niche down on Lake Anna. That I'm not sure how that would work. That's like in our law enforcement towing policy. I don't think it would work on the broad scope, because then they'd be referring everything to us.
Yeah, there's the bigger picture I see. I'm on the Potomac River, and you got to imagine I'm in Maryland, I'm in Virginia, I'm in Fairfax, Prince William, Stafford, Alexandria. We're all over the place. So the problem I have is it will start with what jurisdiction was the vessel in to begin with, and who has the authority to do that. It could be very easily be right on the edge, and they can, we can't determine exactly where it is now. If it's on the shoreline, yes. If it's out in the body of water, then it's a different thing. I think you have the similar problem at Lake Anna. You got different jurisdictions. We're back to the old quagmire of confiscating a vessel, whether it's abandoned or it's DUI or whatever it is. The agency they don't know well enough, and there's not enough good language and direction. So once we develop this, I think within the language that we're going to propose to the state to adopt should hopefully be able to hammer out some of those pieces and make it smoother and clearer for those local agencies to be able to take the authority. If they contract with us, that's fine. That's a straightforward agreement. They've always come to me and said, what, every year they come and say, what can we do about DUIs this year? We don't know what to do. And this is our road policy. This is what we do. Basically, that's what you do. Sounds like the best case where the agency still has control of the vessel. They authorize us to take it wherever it has to go. We have the liability insurance and we have the proper training and the proper skills to do it, and so on and so forth. So the cradle to grave kind of thing. Let's get it to shore and then release it to somebody else, and they take it from there or put it on the owner's trailer or take it to whatever the deal is. So that makes sense.
Correct, Cap. But that's one thing I will say. Both Smith Mountain Lake and Lake Ann, I have experience on both lakes. Both lakes here, as well as Kerr, Gaston, and Bugs, they all have shared jurisdictions from the law enforcement agency. So I could physically be within the geographical constraints of Louisa County or Mineral, and a Spotsylvania deputy will arrest somebody for BUI, and they'll call us out. We'll hook fast to the boat. There'll be a second boat there waiting because the DUI has already been removed to shore. And under our contract tow with them, we'll take them from there to the nearest port and meet a road service tower, hand the boat off, and they'll do a 360 with photos, both out on the water as best they can. Then when it gets to the shore, they'll do a 360 with photos and turn it over. And we have a written agreement for that particular purpose, is so they don't get tied to John Smith's dock and, then cause dock damage and possibly where it is, the wave action actually sink the boat and become a secondary problem to the original problem.
Exactly. In my case, I'm taking the vessel in and probably pulling it out in a travel lift. I have the luxury of owning marina as well as, so when we talk about derelicts and marinas, I'm in that game too, but I have the luxury of being able to take control of the boat from the river to the parking lot, and I can hold it. That's not the case of most towing companies. They don't have that ability. They don't want to they may or may not be able to get it out of the water and put it in an impound lot. Turning it over to a road tower. So we kind of sway back and forth between a value vessel and a non-valued vessel. And we're more in line with a valued vessel. I worry more about liability there because there is something, and I have to turn it over to a guy with a rollback, and he's going to drag this 23-foot boat up on a rollback, and it's going to lay on its side or it's on tires. And now what are they going to do with it? And that's a really scary proposition for me. Now, a piece of junk, a derelict, wreck removal, different animal. Drag it up on the wrecker all day long, take it where you want. So just kind of keep that the liability kind of follows the value, if that makes sense.
It's interesting that you say that, because we did hear from one other state, I think it was Florida, I'm not sure, where they say that any vessel which has a value of less than, I think it's $200, as appraised by a professional, person who really knows vessels, does have a different set of removal laws in place. So that's maybe something else we should look at.
That's interesting too. Yeah. So that kind of follows along with the only way that you can appraise that is bring a marine surveyor in to actually do that.
Yes.
You can come to me as a marina owner and a boater and everything but, and say, what is this boat worth? I could give you a value, and it's probably pretty close. It's worth nothing or it's worth something. $200 is kind of a low number. You could have a 25-foot sailboat laying out there for 3 years, and it's probably still worth $200. But the value number might be a good way to balance that. That's a good point.
All right. Do we have anything else for the liability discussion? I think we hit that pretty good.
Let me, I'll throw one other thing in here, just so you understand the insurance world when it comes to liability. So there's navigable water and non-navigable water. And I don't think that it really isn't going to change much insurance wise, but For me, I have a policy for salvage, wreck removal, diving, all of those, towing, all of those constraints right there. Now, when you take that vessel ashore, you're now under what's called care, custody, and control. So in order for me to be insured to control that vessel in my parking lot, it's called a MOLL, a Marina Operator Legal Liability Policy. There are also marine GL policies out there. What marine GL policy is for somebody that's like a mechanic working on a boat, but he doesn't really take it out and drive it anywhere or do anything with it, doesn't really have control of it in a parking lot. The MOLL is the one that's going to actually cover the control of that vessel and the specific, otherwise they're not covered for it. A regular general liability policy, which that record company has, kind of doesn't apply. So they can't just go out on the water and go drag a boat in with that and be covered under their insurance. It's all different animals. So just keep that in mind, that when you start vetting who can control and who do you want to place these vessels with, and how do we want to hand it off, the insurance policy is a very tricky little area for that.
All right. Well, I'm going to move on to the next topic. And this is, Katie, if you're still there, this is where maybe we could kind of share this one so you could speak of the NOAA grant that may be coming up. But in the funding meeting on Monday, Katie got to speak on, if we were approved for a grant, some priorities and what priority would we decide on. I don't know if you're speaking, Katie, you're on mute, but I can see your screen.
Thank you. Yes, I was speaking, and yes, I was on mute. All right, so almost every year, the NOAA Marine Debris Program has a removal grant. It's usually announced in the summer, and they indicate that it will be offered this year. And the first step is for, if we want to go for it, we have to do a 2-page summary of how much money we would be asking for and what our intent is, what we would do with the money. And it's just a 2-page summary. If NOAA finds that our potential project fits with their goals, then they would ask us to submit a full proposal, which is a big deal. It's a big document with a detailed budget, detailed timeline. This grant also requires a 1-to-1 match. So if we ask for $100,000, we have to come up with $100,000 in match. A lot of times for projects, that match is a combination of dollars that are given to the project or time. So for example, all of you on this phone call who are not paid already through a federal grant, all the hours that you contribute to this grant project would be considered part of the match. So the question is, if we were to go for a grant, I should also point out that I looked at the last 3 or 4 years of this grant, and the funding levels, the lowest was about 50,000 and the highest one was about 230,000. And usually these are over 2 years. So it's not 100,000 each year. If you ask for 100,000, you get 100,000, and you've got 2 years to do the project. So if we were to go for a project, there's some major questions about priorities. Here are some suggestions. We'd like to hear from you if there's another priority. First, we possibly could build on the Rhode Island pilot project. And for those of you unfamiliar with that, basically, Rhode Island has been working about 3 years now on a project to take fiberglass boats, strip them of everything that's not fiberglass, grind them up, and send them to, I think it's South Carolina. Yeah, South Carolina, where they are used as a heat source, an energy source for the process of making cement. And then whatever fiberglass is left at the end of the burning, they're incorporating the fiberglass into the actual cement. So that's a possibility. Another is we possibly could pilot a voluntary turn-in project or program. Third is a possible working with marinas. The work that Jeff has done and I've done talking to various marinas indicate that they've got a backed up issue with ADVs, where they've had certain boats. I'm so sorry. My allergies are horrible this morning. So that's a possibility, working with marinas to resolve their ADV issues. Another is to work with local governments, law enforcement, and planning district commissions to kind of pilot how, if we end up with statewide funding in the future, and if we decide that working with local governments is the best way to go, which other states have done. Other states, rather than have all this done on a state agency level, they work closely with locals, providing them sub-grants. So we could try to pilot that. Somebody pointed out at our last meeting that priorities of ADV removal should be determined based on the hazard level, navigation, and I would add environmental. So that would mean a ADV that's sitting in a marina would probably not benefit from a grant if we were focusing on navigational and environmental hazards. Christy Kehoe, who works for the NOAA Marine Debris Program, did say that prevention of further ADVs is becoming more of a priority for them, for NOAA. So any grant we wrote, we would want to include some prevention work. And then a big question, and actually I'm going to leave it there. And I'll bring up that other question in a minute. So if we were to go for a grant, what do you think of these 4 possible focus areas? Or do you have other ideas?
If I can start off, I like the work with local governments, law enforcement, and planning district commissions. The vessels that are an immediate hazard to navigation, like you said, like in the marinas, they're not going to be a hazard to navigation. I think it's important to focus first on the hazards to navigation. And also if a vessel's sunk at a marina and it's continuously discharging, hopefully that was already taken care of. Something that's more of a hazard to navigation out in a channel or something like that, it could be discharging and no one sees it. That's just my thought.
Okay, good, thank you.
I would agree with you as well, Megan. Like you said, the marinas, I think the majority of the marinas have them under control. If we can get the process to take control of that vessel, and otherwise title or ownership or whatever you want to call it, that they have the authority to actually dispose of the vessel, will speed up and fix the problem at the marinas to some degree. I think they're not that they won't take money to get rid of them, but as long as the landfills and the process crushing it up, putting it in a dumpster and getting rid of it isn't too onerous, they brought that problem upon themselves. I don't have any derelict abandoned vessels in my marina. My brother might have a couple that have been left because somebody didn't pay, but most of them have a bit of a value. There's a couple marinas around I know have a lot of junk laying around because they didn't want to throw it away, and that's not my problem. That's their problem. They chose to think that it was valuable and they hung on to it until it has no value. So that's their problem. But as long as we can make it reasonably easy for the marinas to dispose of them, great, done, over with. Let's move on, and let's like I said, focus on those that are either a hazard to navigation or a pollution hazard or some other sort of hazard. If nothing else, it's an eyesore of being on the waterfront. It needs to go away.
Okay, great.
What's not a pollution, what's not a navigational hazard today could be tomorrow in a storm or with a high flood tide of some sort, taking it adrift. So keep that in mind.
Good point. Okay. Any other thoughts on these? I haven't heard any support for trying to pilot a voluntary turn-in program. Personally, my thoughts are that's probably too ambitious for a grant this size. But any other thoughts on that?
Well, right now I can tell you that repurposing a lot of low value boats, because you can't find boats and people are looking for them. So it's sort of taking care of itself to some degree, and at least in this area, I would think. Maybe in some of the rural areas where you have, people that have 3 boats and 6 cars sitting in the backyard because they don't want to get rid of them. Well, that's a whole different animal. And are you going to get them to turn them in anyway? If you pay them, yes, they will. But if you don't pay them to turn it in, then they're probably not going to get rid of it either. So.
Yeah, that's a really good point that we've discussed a little bit with Anthony as he's writing his policy paper, is that the focus of this work group is not the derelict boat that's in the backyard. That's more of a litter issue. But yeah, good point. We need to make sure that we craft our suggestions so that we don't incentivize the wrong thing.
I also
Okay.
think it's a timing thing for piloting a voluntary turn-in program. So our first stab at getting rid of ADVs, since we don't have a program yet, I'm sure there's plenty of navigational hazards to get rid of first. And also, people might not be ready to get rid of their boats because of the COVID timeframe. Boating is a COVID-friendly activity. I know a lot of people have gotten boats and campers over the past year because they can do that. So just between the fact that we haven't had this program before and the whole COVID-friendly activity, it's just probably not the best timing for that. But like in the future, after we get this program rolling, a turn-in program, and when the whole COVID thing goes away and people don't want their boat anymore, that would be a great time for a voluntary program.
Right. That's a good point too, that the states that have this voluntary program, they didn't start with it. They added it onto a program after a few years. So, okay. I'm just making really rough notes, but we'll perfect this later. Any other thoughts on priorities here? I mean, this is great input. I appreciate it. Well, the next questions about this grant is who would do the actual work? We're probably not going to solve that on this phone call, but writing a grant, submitting a grant, and then managing the fiscal aspect of it and doing the work, it's a big deal. A lot of times these grants involve hiring a consultant to take a major chunk of the work over the 2-year period. We learned that state and local governments are eligible to submit a grant. Certainly, nonprofits are. Now, my group, Clean Virginia Waterways, is with Longwood University, and we've already submitted and we've been successful with a couple of grants from NOAA. But I have to tell you that colleges take a chunk of money out of grants for indirect costs to cover, electricity and building maintenance and everything that they have to take care of. So $100,000 grant can become a $75,000 grant real quickly. So that would be an argument against Clean Virginia Waterways taking the lead on this. Just wanted to put that out there. And then I guess we would have to have a close conversation with either Department of Wildlife Resources or VMRC, because I think that this grant could be seen as a capacity building, and NOAA loves that. They love to see that a project is going to build the ability of a state to continue with a project even after the grant's done. So you could see that maybe a part-time employee of a state agency whose job is to do this, like 20 hours a week or whatever we can afford. So that's a possibility. So any other thoughts about who would do the work? I'm assuming it would be a partnership, but somebody's got to be the one who's writing the grant and managing the funds. Any thoughts on who that could or should be?
I don't know. The light bulb went off in my head when you said a consultant. That would be my vote, but I just don't have any any experience whatsoever in writing any of this. So that's just, I don't really have too many thoughts on it.
Okay. All right. Well, what we'll probably do is come up with another little subcommittee of people who are interested in working on this particular project, because we should start getting our thoughts together. Because usually once NOAA says, oh, this grant's open, you have like a month to pull together a letter of interest. So it's best to start the conversations early, because it takes quite a bit of time to pull this together. But it looks like, you know, we're on the right road. Sounds like we're getting some consensus around some of the priorities. And I should point out too that some of the other grants that I saw were given by the NOAA Marine Debris Program were to support the very work that we're already doing without their support. So I think that we've shown that we're interested and we're bringing together a great team and we're making great progress. So I'm hoping that will be beneficial to us if we submit a proposal. And then the last question about this is that one-to-one match. Again, if every dollar they give us, we've got to match it. We're thinking that the time element will probably not be hard to come up with a whole lot of match of the in-kind time that people are contributing. But money, we would have to come up with some funds. Somebody suggested the energy companies that own or run part of Lake Anna and Smith Mountain Lake. Those are two corporations that might be willing to contribute. There's also the Virginia Environmental Endowment. And they've never done anything like this, but I think reading that their goals and mandates, I think we could argue it would be a really good investment of their endowment as well. So can anybody think of other possible sources of mostly money at this point?
I have a question for Dominion or the other corporations that are by those lakes. That would only be for, could that be for doing any of these projects anywhere in the state, or would that be for removing a vessel on their lake, Lake Anna or Smith Mountain Lake?
That is a really, really excellent question. We would probably want to say your support will support the statewide effort. They might want to say we want to support it specifically on our lake. That would be part of the negotiation and discussion.
But by supporting the statewide effort, eventually, no matter where we choose to focus first, the Tidewater region, wherever we start removing abandoned derelict vessels first, eventually it'll get to them if they support our initial project. I think.
Right, especially if our project isn't just about removal, but it's also about prevention and taking us one step closer to having a statewide program. Yes, they would definitely benefit by supporting this project. Yeah. Any other thoughts? If not, back to the agenda and I'll stop sharing. But thank you all for your input, and there'll be lots of opportunity for more input on this.
Okay. Okay. So originally on my agenda, I was going to name those 4 proposed priorities that we spoke about initially on Monday. And then I was going to go into, okay, so how can our subcommittee, there's a common theme, I thought, with most of them, how the removal and disposal subcommittee can support all the priorities. And that's by having pre-identified contractors and landfills, what the contractors can do, and the requirements by the landfills. So knowing how much they would charge, knowing what material do they want removed from the vessel before it enters the landfill, how small do they want it cut up. That's how we can directly support most of those priorities. So rolling right into the next thing, I asked Gary if he wouldn't mind talking about there is no typical removal of a vessel, but maybe he could identify one vessel that's been removed from start to finish and turn it into like just a little case study to talk about. And then he invited Terry Hill to also speak on the topic. So yeah, if you guys have, if you'd like to talk about the removal process and what's all involved, that would be great.
Megan, I'd like to defer my time to Captain Hill. He is much more knowledgeable with the abandoned side of it. We have been very blessed and very lucky on the lake that we have been able to recover every owner so far. So.
Well, so for us, thanks, Gary. Throw me right there in the frying
I
pan
didn't mean
for
to,
that.
sir.
No, that's fine. It's so my experiences with abandoned vessels, and then there's also the non-abandoned salvage and wreck removal is the larger portion of what we do. So an abandoned vessel is usually a state agency or somebody's going to say, get it out of here. I'd have early in my towing career, I took away about a dozen vessels that were next door here in the marina and just said, we're going to clean up the creek, and we just disposed of them. I hauled them out, took them to the landfill. And back in those days, you could just load the boat on a trailer if it wasn't too big, back it up at the landfill and push it off, and they loved it. They'd run it over the big machine and have fun with it. But now it's become a lot more refined. So we have to look at what the cost and the time involved to get them out is now where we sit. So for me, the situation starts with, you got to get it out of where it is. That's what we do is salvage, wreck removal. There's a difference between the two. Salvage typically means it has value. Wreck removal generally means that it does not have value. It's a total vessel and it's eventually going to be disposed of. That's kind of our language. Salvage can be used as a broad term, and then you have to kind of define what it is that you're working with. But we get these things up. So a lot of times it's going to require divers, lift bags. Doing that, you're going to be doing it by OSHA regulations and Coast Guard regulations. So you're going to have a dive team, and it's a 3-man dive team and a crew and a boat, and you're getting this that or a barge and an excavator, and you're trying to pick it up and put it. The ideal thing is to pick it up in as few pieces as possible, and then you transfer it to shore, and then dispose of it. And for us, the disposal is a process that we bring in a vac truck, and they suck out any contamination, the oils or the fuel in the bilge. You don't really even know what's even in the fuel tank. A lot of times it's just water anymore. So that's a big factor to try to determine what hazmat deals you're going to have to attend with, and then dispose of that, crush it up. We put it in a dumpster and take it away. I don't really know where it goes. I don't care what landfill it goes to. I just want it in a dumpster. It's the easiest thing for me. And, a dumpster ends up running you $600, $800, depending on the dumpster. And you've got a machine to crush it up and everything. I charge $150 a foot to dispose of a vessel. And that's a common number. I use it every day, and we go from there. For us to raise one off the bottom, depending on situation, factor in $250 a foot. That takes into account the wintertime as well as the summertime, which would typically be a little bit lower sometimes. Divers, if it's just something where we can put a pump on it and pull it off, we can probably get away with it for $150 to $200 a foot. If it's something where we're going to need a crane, we're talking about a larger boat that's over, say, 30 feet, 40 feet maybe. You got to have a crane involved, or you're hitting $300 to $400 a foot to get it out of there, or possibly more, especially if they're only coming in with one, the rig to haul it out with one shot. If there's 2 or 3 boats, then you can spread that over the cost. But for us, it's that. Most every towboat U.S. company is not only licensed for the business that they're doing in the area, they're insured, and they have the proper people, operate under the proper parameters. Like I said, following if you put a diver in the water without the backup diver and things of that nature, there's a lot of requirements on the dive team and doing that properly. It's not just throw a guy in a wetsuit and have him go out there and hook up to it and do it. It's a little bit more complicated than that for us on the liability side and doing it properly, hazmat response and so forth. But I don't know if that covers what you were looking for there. Again, I have a marina, so it's easy for me. I can pick the boat up and put it ashore. Those that don't, they have to worry about the transfer from the water to the shore, and then they don't own the property so they can only get it up and get it to shore. They can't really perform the disposal piece of it. And it's not uncommon to find some of the towing companies that are limited to just the wreck removal piece, not the disposal piece of it, because they don't have the properties to do with it. So that's a factor there. I think this program could benefit in the marinas in terms of winning the marinas over and encourage them to work with us more so. If there's a marina that, for instance, Gary, if you have a place down there that doesn't really want to work with you, but if you can show that you're going to take care of it this way and you've got the funding behind it, there's some money in it for them, then that might help grease the wheels, so to speak, to make it easier for us to handle some of these projects in the future.
Well, Captain Hill, I'm actually very, very lucky. My marina says whatever it takes, they're on board with. And I have my storage lot, and I have a crew that's dedicated to handle this when it happens. I think that's going to be the key, is vetting these companies that can handle it basically from, like you said, from the water to the grave, one shot, where they don't have to have so many working fingers involved, separate companies involved. And that's just, it's easier for me not to have to manage my salvage crew and my towboat crew, then turn it over to another crew who's going to take it. And then you've got to follow them up to make sure they met the environmental standard. Then the disposal, it's easier, I think, with, just like you said, one company from basically birth to death of the vessel.
And that probably saves money too, I'm sure, instead of hiring 3 different companies to do 3 different elements.
Right. Correct.
Now, there are contractors. I've got when I do my projects, I weigh it out depending on where I am. If I'm up in say at Belhaven, which is the northern part of Virginia, just south of Alexandria, if I'm up there, I've had a couple of cases where I've got a contractor over in Maryland that disposes of boats much cheaper than I do. So I turned it over to him and he hauls it away. Now, these are trailable boats. They can be trucked on a trailer and hauled away. So there's different categories. When you're starting to get into I'd use a 30-foot limit is probably a good number. If it's a sailboat, a 30-foot sailboat is pretty daggone big. You've got a large keel and a heavy keel, and it's a little bit more complicated. So sailboats are probably 25-foot, 27 and under. Power boats in the 30s, then you end up with twin engines and things of that after that. So it starts to get complicated over 30 feet, and the numbers will climb because of the proportion of it. And being able to, you can't just haul it out on a trailer, where we can haul out a boat up to pretty close to 30 feet on a trailer and drag it somewhere and take it to a lot off property or off the shore and go somewhere to do it. But the bigger ones are going to require either a tractor trailer to haul it somewhere else and then another machine to transfer it off the tractor. It gets pretty complicated. When you do a hurricane, I've done a lot of hurricanes. I worked for Boat US as a CAT team member as well. So I was the salvage coordinator for probably 8 of the major hurricanes. And the collection of those, that's a whole different animal when we're talking volume. And when we get into that, that's something I'm looking forward to this group also tackling and addressing is how we handle a hurricane response and the large volume of boat removals, because Florida got into that and they kind of hired one contractor, and that contractor was told to go out and pick everything up. And they actually had sheriffs telling the towboat guys, you can't go in there and get our boats. We already contracted. Insurance companies paying us to get these boats out of here. And they basically came in and says, nope, we're taking them all. They piled them all up on a barge, took them ashore and set them aside so you can come get them there. Well, we lost work. 2, we would have been faster. 3, the owner of the boat is now upset because it's stacked up and piled up and it did damage to the boat. So it's a very disastrous way to go about it unless it's controlled properly. But we'll get into that. But the one-on-ones are just like I just described.
Okay, so Gary and I talked about this Monday and Tuesday. So one of the projects I'd like for this group to do is to go region by region and compile a list of resources for removing vessels. So I was going to propose to Gary and Terry, you guys know the requirements for removal contractors. You guys have done it before. If you both could take on identifying contractors that could do the removal piece for each region. My goal was to have one region done per month. So next month we'd be able to present the resources that we found for one of the regions. And I'll share how I plan on dividing our regions up. We have to do it somehow. So I thought we'd use DEQ regions just to keep it uniform. I thought we would start with the northern region. So that is, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but
Yeah.
And I will send you guys, I'll send to our entire subcommittee, I'll send out some meeting notes and of course a recap, and I'll send the link to get to this. This is just a screen grab from the DEQ homepage. They just redid our website, and I used to like it a lot better when they just listed like, these are the counties in northern, these are the counties. Now they made it interactive. So you have to actually click on each one. But this picture, I'll share this picture too, so you can just identify. So that's northern. I thought we'd start with that. And in addition to identifying contractors, I'll be taking on identifying all the landfills that exist in that region. And I'm taking that on since I am DEQ, and DEQ manages permits for landfills. So all I have to do is reach out to our solid waste staff in northern and then all the other regions and be like, hey, give me all your landfills and a point of contact. Or if you don't mind, can you reach out to them? If somebody brings a, say, 30-foot vessel, we'll just use that as the average example. What would you require? I'm sure they want hazmat removed. How small do you want it cut up? Or do you just throw 30-foot vessels in your landfill? So that's going to be my part of this, compiling the info. And I was just going to see if Gary and Terry, if you identify contractors in the region, you can just Word doc email with their name, the best person at that company to reach out to for removing a vessel or starting a contract with them, phone number, their physical location, and I'll compile, there'll be a document for each region, and I'll make it nice and formatted and pretty, and then share it with the whole work group at some point. It'll live with us at first. And I'm going to call this project, so Gary emailed me again Monday or Tuesday, and you titled the email ADV Resources by Region, and I liked how it sounded, so that's what we're going to call this project, ADV Resources by Region. So if you guys are good with that plan, we could have all of our ADV resources by region, since there's 6 DEQ regions. That's just how I'm dividing it up. We could have all of this information compiled by what?
We got it done already.
October.
How much more do you want? We're done.
I know, that's why I asked you guys, and I know you could probably have it done like in a day.
I got the list right here. There's only, so there's only if I go, the process that I'm using is basically, I would say that one, I would want them to be a Seaport member, which is a national association that vets, and basically it's a qualification that they meet standards and so forth, ACAP certified. It's about the only process for qualifying or quantifying a towing and salvage company on the water. Gary is one, I'm one. Well, all the Towboat US operators are. Unfortunately, the CTOW operators are not. So that's just one way of going about it, saying, okay, this is one way to vet who's qualified and capable, has the right resources. Then second from that would be really, you know, any towing and salvage company that that is legitimate. But when you talk about the regions, for instance, look at the northern region, which is me and Gary both. You're you're on the lower portion of the northern region, and I'm in the upper portion of it. And then there's the whole western side of it that goes out to wherever. So there's probably not going to be many that we're going to be dealing with out towards Loudon, Fauquier, places like that. We're really coastal. We're going to be in along the navigable waters and the lakes. I guess if there's lakes out there, I'm not thinking of that, but so I would just question how we chop it up that way. It's not that hard to do, but when you get out into the full western side of Virginia, that's a long run for either of us or any of us that are water, navigable water associated. There's a few lakes in there, and we can work it with that. I just don't see us having a lot of volume from there either. So that's probably a good thing. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around what and how we go about that. And
well, and I think if funding got approved for, if I'm not familiar with the western part of the state, but I think Lake Gaston is down here.
Correct. Lake
That's the Blue Ridge
Gaston,
Regional.
Islands is there.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
then Smith Mountain Lake is just 3 counties up, go straight up now.
Uh-huh.
Come to the left of that dot, just a little behind that little square corner. That's about where Smith Mountain is.
Okay.
Then there's nothing in the peninsula down at the bottom.
Okay. If funding's approved to remove a vessel all the way out there, or no matter where it is, I think there's going to be plenty of notice. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think there'd be plenty of notice for somebody to come across the state with their resources.
Right.
I don't know. That's just my thought.
we can take care of it. I don't think it's a problem. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around the contractors in that area. Because there's only, my list right now is there's 5 of us, maybe 6. And that covers everything down the eastern portion of the state here, and basically halfway into it, and even the lakes as well, around those lakes, but not necessarily the large broad area. But I think we're fine. I think we can give you that list easily.
Okay. All
It's
right.
going to be a bigger challenge to get what the landfills, because there's a lot more landfills, and there's going to be a lot different requirements in each of those landfills as to what they want and don't want. Just keep in mind that most of them, like I said, the further out toward the west you get, yeah, bring it on, whatever you want. Just bring it to me any way you want. We'll take it, probably. When you're talking about Fairfax and so on and so forth, now we're talking about cut it up in 12 by 12 pieces and not more than 15 at a time, stuff like that.
And that's the problem I've run into. I just received the Spotsylvania R Board says that they're temporarily holding on taking any vessels right now. So I've got to now, if I have something at Lake Anna, I can't take it from my Fredericksburg lot location where I cut it up and dispose of it. I can't take it to the R Board down the street. I've got to now, and Stafford is part of that R Board as well. So now I've got to just basically hold it until somebody else opens up, or they say they start taking fiberglass again.
I guess that's a good reason to include in my research how much they would charge, because if somebody up in, like you said, Fairfax, if they're like, yeah, we're taking it, but this is how much we charge, but I don't know, maybe this would happen an hour away, it's drastically less.
Well, we're already transporting our hazardous stuff like the bilge pump out and things of that nature. They're already taking that down to Petersburg to the hazmat. So, I mean, trucking it might be, unfortunately, one of the only solutions. But if we could even get somebody that would take it for free or a negotiated rate saying, hey, we're doing this on bulk for the state, maybe get that pricing, because I know there's a whole different sets of levels of pricings for landfills.
Now, is that including, have you checked with just a regular dumpster company like Waste Management or Nova Roll-Offs?
Waste Management, Nova Roll-Offs, I'm too far out of their loop, so I'm stuck down on this end of town with County Waste, right. And they have a no fiberglass, no asbestos policy currently.
Okay.
I mean, I was getting ready. Part of my thing today was I was going to call Mike Waggy because he still has a roll-off and see what he could do about finding a place to put this.
Yeah, that's my suggestion. For me, it's not me taking care of the disposal all the way to the end. It's handing it over to these other contractors, like a dumpster and a hazmat, a vac truck sucking everything out and being done with it. Just quicker, cleaner.
Yeah.
I feel like as vessels are identified in their unique situation, their unique location, we may discover that, why don't we just cut it up and put it in a dumpster?
Right.
But I think that's going to be unique to each sunken vessel that we deal with, or each ADV that we deal with. I'm going to go ahead and compile a list of landfills just as a resource to use, and this is why we're on this removal and disposal subcommittee, because when we do identify the boats, like I said at the beginning, we're the subject matter experts. That's why you guys are on this subcommittee. You've done it before plenty of times. I've only dabbled in it and have an interest in it. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll learn a lot by that, by what the landfills will take, when they'll take it, and that kind of thing. It's
Mhm.
it's interesting to see what it is and how it changes.
Well, and even if we, like I said, even if we identify that we should have a dumpster, the dumpster still has to go somewhere, of course. So,
Right.
Are
you going to look into the private landfills as well? Like up here, we have rainwater, and there was one down here. It's a construction dump in Dumfries. I think it's getting ready to close down, but are you going to check into that too, or?
as long as they have a DEQ permit, I think even if they're private, they need a permit. I'm not in solid waste. I'm in general pollution response. So, I'm pretty sure that private contract or private landfills still need DEQ permitting, and DEQ would be aware of them. So,
Yeah, and I think they may be more likely to take stuff than some of the county landfills, because it's really restrictive.
yeah.
All right, this is easy for us.
Hey, real quick, I got a question for either Terry or Gary. The removal process, this is probably just a dumb question showing my ignorance, but what's kind of that breaking it down, and how, you mentioned the dimensions. Does it have to be like a perfect square, and are you using a chainsaw, or are you using some other power tool? What's kind of the messy process?
That was a joke to me. Yeah.
Yep. No, mine's not a joke. I've got to cut it down for the dumpster company. When the landfills are taken, I have to cut it down to a 24 by 24 square, or something that would fit in a 24 by 24 cube. I have to strip all the metal, copper, aluminum, engines, hazardous materials, fuel cell. It all has to be removed. I pay a guy to walk around in level 3 decon suits to get that done. And we're cutting it up with sawzalls, respirators, face shields. Then we're putting it in a dumpster. The dumpster we have to line with plastic. And then we're just following their guidelines for the landfill companies.
That's interesting. So mine is a little simpler.
Yeah.
I have a great big excavator with a thumb on it, and I just crunch it up into pieces and throw it in a dumpster. Pull out the metal, like you said, but I don't pull out every single piece of wire. I don't have to do all that. It's a little bit looser. All fluids, the major metal parts, engines, things like that come off, and the rest of it goes in the dumpster. So it's a little bit simpler for me, and I don't really know where it goes, and I paid the dumpster company to do it. They're a legitimate company, so I'm not getting Fred's dumpster to take it out and dump in his backyard. That used to be done, but not anymore.
Great, thanks.
Okay. And Terry, quick question for you. I didn't have your like introduction information from the last meeting. What company, towing company and marina do you have? I'm
Towboat US Potomac. So
Okay.
we run 6 boats. We got them from DC down to Fairview Beach into King George County. So I do the upper 50 miles of the Potomac River. My marina is located right behind Leesavania State Park in Woodbridge, and it's called Hampton Landing Marina.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that takes me to my last thing on the agenda. Conclusion and next meeting. So I think we only have, we only have a few people on this call, but the next meeting, it's gonna have to be the last full week in April. The 2 weeks prior to that, I am on my 2 weeks Coast Guard active duty. And I just wanted to remind you guys, if you're interested in the NOAA ADV webinar series, it's the 4th Thursday of every month. So that's tomorrow. And then the next 4th Thursday of April will occur before our next meeting can take place. That's April 22nd. So just in case you're interested in that. So I think this was a really productive meeting, and that's all I have. You guys have anything else you'd like to add before I conclude this?
No, thanks for having me.
Sure. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. And thank you both for your willingness to speak on the removal process. I know it was last minute. It happens sometimes.
No,
So,
it's easy for us. That's what we do. It's
Yeah, that's our
fits right
daily
in our-
job.
yeah.
all right. Well, then I am going to go ahead and conclude the meeting. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.
All right, take care.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Megan, I can send you